Problem 3-85. In this, we're given this graph over here, and we want to fill out this table based on that graph. So, this graph has an x and a y axis. It's labeled, and also the scale is given to us. We're given that each tick mark on the y counts as 1, and each tick mark along the x counts as 1. This isn't always the case, so it's important that they give this information here. But for each of these points, we just want to write down their x and y coordinates in this xy table. So we'll start with the leftmost point, and it looks like it is at this tick mark here, which is -1x, and it's at -1 to -3y. So in our table, we can just write -1, -3, and this corresponds to this point here. So we've put in its coordinates in the x and y. Next point here is at 0x and at -1y. Next one is at 1x and at 1y. We do 1, 1. This one is at 2x and at 1, 2, 3y. And finally, we have this point up here, which is at 1, 2, 3x, and at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5y. So that's part A. Part B, we now want to find the algebraic rule that fits both this graph and this table. But it's a little hard to use the graph. It's much easier if we use this information we filled out the table with. So we want to find a rule that takes us from an x to the y below it. So something that takes us from 0 to -1, from 1 to 1, from 2 to 3, and from 3 to 5. And there should be one rule that makes all those true. So here we have the 0, and we can get the 0 to -1 by simply subtracting 1. But if you look at any of the other numbers, simply subtracting 1 doesn't look like it'll work. You can't get from 1 to 1 by subtracting 1. 1 minus 1 would be 0. So we know the rule isn't y equals x minus 1, but that gives us some information about what it might be. If you're reminded that what the rule will always look like, it will always be y equals something times x plus something. So we want to try multiplying the x before we subtract the 1, maybe. So here we have 3 and we'll go to 5. So if we multiply 3 by 2, we'll get 6. And then if we subtract 1, we'll get 5. So that should work. Let's try this one here. So we're multiplying by 2 and subtracting 1. 2 multiplied by 2 is 4. Subtract 1 is 3. Seems to work. 1 multiplied by 2 is 2. Subtract 1 is 1. 0 times 2 is 0. Minus 1 is -1. And -1 times 2 is -2. And then subtracting 1 from -2, we get -3. So it looks like the rule would be 2 multiplied by x plus -1. Or, to write that in a nicer way, it would be y equals 2x minus 1. And when we look at this graph here, you'll also note that we cross the y-axis at the point -1. Right here, so if we were to draw a line between these points, it would cross over this y-axis at this point right here, -1, which is also what we're subtracting here, a -1. And this is something that will be true for any of these graphs like this. The point that crosses the y-axis will also be what we're adding here.